Ah! It's a Gundam!
Where?
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on when you're watching this. It's Mr. G, and I hope you watched either the history of Golden Age comics or the history of cartoons before you watch this video. Because today I'm going to talk about my favorite comic. This relates to the assignment that this video is attached to. My favorite comic is the X-Men and has been, well, since almost basically since I could read for over 30 years. The reason for that, the X-Men being my favorite, is that I identified with the characters, not a singular character, more or less the concept that was driving many of the characters, and that is feelings of being an outcast, feelings of being different, and feelings of wanting to leave the world a better place than what I found it. And that's why, excuse me, that's why the X-Men speak to me a great deal. Now, how does this relate to cartooning? Because that's the focus of our lessons. Well, a colleague of mine once said that cartooning is the gateway to other forms of art. Without cartooning, we wouldn't have animation to an extent, at least I'm assuming, and we wouldn't have comic books. And I am a lifelong comic book fan. And again, my biggest fandom nerding thing is the X-Men. I've been reading the X-Men for well over 30 years. And I've got a few examples of my collection that I'm going to share with you. First and foremost, the classic Dark Phoenix Saga. This bad girl, bad boy, bad whatever, I'm not going to assume its gender. It has been adapted into 2 films. It has been adapted into a 5-part animated serial in the early 90s and is arguably one of the best X-Men stories ever to be written. The artwork by John Byrne is top notch. He's legitimately at the top of his game in here. Chris Claremont's writing is firing on all cylinders, and it's a story that resonates with me greatly because of its feelings of sometimes you feel a little hopeless and you need to be reminded that you're a bright spot in the universe. Another example is Life Death, again by Chris Claremont and Barry Windsor Smith. And this one speaks to me because the lead character, Storm, when she had a mohawk, is the 80s. Great time for expression of weird hair. It deals with loss, and very, very powerful story for that reason. And, that's the 80s. Oh, no, not quite, because we got Days of Future Past here, which is another one of my favorite stories, also adapted into a fairly successful film. And this one deals with hope and trying to change your destiny. And moving along, got a representative from the 90s, Mutant Genesis, arguably one of my favorite works by Jim Lee. It's the first 7 issues of his 11-issue run on the 1990 X-Men series, which, fun fact, the first issue is a Guinness World Record holder for the most sold comics of all time for the first issue. Something like 7 million copies sold. You get something a little bit more modern here, Battle of the Atom. It's a very convoluted story. I can't summarize that very accurately. And something very recent, as in within the last year, House of X and Powers of 10. This sets the current status quo for the X-Men as we know it. So the X-Men, on top of being outcasts and feeling as though the world hates and fears them, they're also family. And in many instances, and especially in a lot of those books, and those are just the examples that I picked off my shelf, there's a lot more graphic novels that I own featuring the X-Men, but it's about family and it's about relationships with people. And I'm not trying to convert any fans, but it's a very resonating comic series for me. Or at least it has been for well over 30 years. So your assignment is to tell me what your favorite comic strip or comic character is and why. Uh, I gave you about 5.5 minutes of why I like the X-Men. I could go on and on and on. That's just the X-Men. If you wanted me to talk about why I liked Spider-Man, I can tell you about why I like Spider-Man, especially the current run with Nick Spencer and Ryan Ottley on art. That's just a masterclass in classic Spidey writing. But I've been nerding for a little too long. I don't want this lesson to go on for a while because I know you've got a lot on your plate. So take it easy, and I will catch you next time.